All right, we're live.
Yo, what's going on?
Welcome to your Everyday Rich podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Jen,
And I'm Jason.
and here we are, sitting on our new chairs.
Yeah, man. We got some new chairs finally. I don't know about you, but it takes forever. This took forever to find chairs.
Yeah, because chairs are bloody expensive, that's why.
Yeah, and like the chairs that we were looking at were never available. But most importantly, they were too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And they never went on sale. Today we are, well, before we get started, want to say shout out to a small business, local business in the Greater Toronto area, because we like highlighting businesses. And eventually, hopefully, we get sponsored by one of these one day, right? Wink, 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 wink. But want to shout out our good friends at Portraits on White, I think the best photo booth for your events, your life moment events in the Toronto area. And they're basically a photo booth that takes really, really classy black and white memories, and without any of the cheesy, corny props that you get at a typical photo booth. Because nothing like looking like a cowboy and a funny
You don't
staff.
like those funny glasses in the boa pictures?
Yeah, it's like 2002 all over again, right?
It's like New Year's Eve every day at every wedding.
No offense if you had one of those photo booths, but it was probably really fun. I just don't remember it. So if I was at one of those events.
We've been to many of those booths.
So, but yeah, shout out Portraits on White. Check them out. Yeah, today we were actually debating a few topics to talk about. And one of these topics was actually spurred on some things that we've been chatting about with like younger people, but also people our age that haven't really gotten into the housing market. Because as you know, the housing market's been like crazy. Right?
Yeah, especially in the GTA. It's insane.
Yeah. So, we're this topic of, is it better to buy or rent your primary residence? That's kind of come up in a lot of different mediums.
Yeah.
Whether it's the news or even sometimes, with our friends or other investor friends. It's a big debate.
Well, it's a big decision, right? A lot of people make, maybe in their late 20s, early 30s when they start to get established for themselves.
Yeah. You're going to talk a little bit louder, but in your mic there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, yeah, no, it's a big decision, especially an emotional one, because anytime it involves your house, there's these invisible scripts that you kind of been programmed with. And if you think back to this whole Canadian dream, like
The American dream.
the American dream is come to Canada, come to America and buy your own home, right? Like the goal in life is to own your own home so you can raise a family.
The white picket fence, kind of picturesque, picture that everyone draws.
Yeah.
It's like, this is my house with the white picket fence and flowers and nice porch and,
Golf green lawn.
the dream. Yeah. And I think that's what we've all been somewhat programmed to think, right? Like, we go to school and, we get our first job and we start making money, and goal is to buy your own home.
Yeah, and never really thought about it. Even when we were kind of looking at or buying the home we're living in right now, it's never understood, why do we need to buy our own home? Like, why do we need to buy the home we live in, right? And when we thought about it, it really is come down to programming.
Mm-hmm.
Comes down to a social norm, like social norms that we navigate, that we talk about in our very first episode.
Yeah.
These are social norms that we just grew up with. our parents grew up with, probably probably not, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it just gets programmed into you, especially if it's, you know, that's all you hear about. And if your friends' parents are the same boat from immigrants coming into Canada, their goal is going to want to buy a home. So naturally, we feel like that too. But like another thing that we were like examining here, right? Where we started to get interested in, you know, outside of the psychology, like there's a math portion to it too. I mean, we're nerds at heart here, so math is always something we look at.
Yeah, like financially, does it make sense to buy, or does it make more sense to rent?
Yeah.
From a strict finance standpoint.
Yeah, forget the whole emotional part, right? Get rid of the whole stigma of like, oh, it's, you know, it's bad to rent. You should only buy your house.
Well, yeah, like I think growing up, we've always been told that don't rent because you're just wasting your money. You're throwing money away.
Oh man, I heard this all the time. I heard when I had my first job outside of university, one of my colleagues, he's been working for like a few years before me. He was renting for like 7 years. And I remember everyone else in our team
Judging him.
Oh yeah, they were totally judging him. They was like, "Yo, why are you renting? Like, I don't understand. You live downtown. Why are you renting your apartment?" And I remember him telling me, and it was just like, it's just so much flexibility. Like it works for him.
Yeah.
Him and his wife at that time, no kids.
Yeah. Well, renting is seen as a temporary measure.
Yeah.
You rent because you need to temporarily live in a certain place. It's never seen as someone's permanent residence, like when you're renting a home, right?
I think that's faulty too. I think it's a faulted view.
Yeah.
To believe that it's only rent equates to temporary.
Yeah.
Whereas it could actually be in beneficial favor for you to rent your entire life.
Yeah. Rent in the long term.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of other, I would say, benefits that aren't necessarily at the surface level when it comes to renting.
Yeah.
Because we don't really dig deeper than just the surface level when it comes to this stuff. But yeah.
So let's break down the numbers.
Well, before we break down the numbers, I actually wanted to, I remember seeing a chart. Remember this chart that we saw on a newsletter, Jen? And I actually saw it recently again on someone's IG post. It's this whole graph about incomes plotted against housing costs. So the average income yearly increase over like a span of like 30 years, they track this. And they also plotted the cost and price of houses, Canadian houses. And as it came to like the mid 2000s and obviously after post 2008 financial crisis, housing crisis in the States, like it just started exponentially growing. The gap just kept getting bigger from housing prices to average wages, because our inflation has completely gone out of control because of money printing, but our wages have not been able to keep up.
Yeah, so the gap between the cost of a house and what you're getting paid at work is getting larger and larger, which essentially is an affordability problem.
No, like back to the day, like if you were making whatever, like 50, 60 grand, like think about it. You
can be considered middle class, right? And be able to afford a home. People who lived on single incomes could afford a home. I highly doubt in today's world, like it's very difficult for a single income family to purchase a house. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, when the housing is 10 to 15 plus your average wage or your average annual salary, it's totally nearly impossible to be able to save up for a home down payment. Like an article in the Star I saw was it takes the average person in Canada 25 years or something like that, 26 years.
That's crazy.
To save up for an average home.
Yeah.
So think about it. You basically have to save for the amount of time you probably be working your 9 to 5 before buying.
At that point, by the time you buy a home, you're like in your 50s.
At that point, I'd probably be renting at an old age home anyways. But
well, that's the time you're trying to move out of your like larger home and downsize.
Yeah. That's another topic, downsizing. But yeah, let's go into some of the numbers, and hopefully you guys can follow along. So we'll try to explain this as concisely and clearly as possible in audio format. So we looked at basically what's the math behind buying versus renting, right? And we took $1 million home. Okay, we just started with $1 million home. Kind of, what's the article, the average home price in
It's $1 million.
$1 million, okay? And if it's not $1 million now, I'm sure it will be in years to come. So, so we looked at a $1 million home and essentially took, okay, well, what does it cost to buy? What do we need to do to buy?
Well, you need to put in, most people will put in 20% down.
Yeah.
You can put less, but let's not go into all these different scenarios. Let's assume a 20% down, right, on $1 million home, which means you need to have $200,000.
Yep.
So let's say hypothetically in this situation, you're comparing, we're buying a $1 million home and we have $200,000 cash to put in as a down. We saved up,
Right. So yeah, so we get an $800,000 mortgage based on a 20% down payment, and at a 5%, we took 5% interest rate at today's interest rates as of today, right? Give or take.
And let's assume that's an average over like 25 years. Like probably in that 25 years, you're going to go through a high and a low, right? You'll have a low interest period, and you'll have a high interest period. So like, let's assume we average it out 5% over 25 years.
Yeah.
For the purpose of this calculation.
Yeah, exactly. For the purpose of this calculation. So then, essentially we looked at, okay, well, over 25 years, right? As you renew your mortgages every 5 years or 10-year terms, whatever you did, there's obviously going to be an interest, right? So now you are borrowing $800,000. There's a cost. That's why there's interest to borrow the actual money. All right. So what is that total borrowing cost over 25 years? And we worked the math out. It was basically $600K of interest over 25 years.
So essentially, to borrow $800,000, you're paying $600,000 in interest over 25 years to borrow that $800,000.
Yeah. So basically, at the end of the day, your total cost of the mortgage was $1.4 million on your $1 million home. Okay, so then there's also this thing called property tax on top of what homeowners need to pay every year. And essentially, we took a number that we've been observing similar house prices or houses having to pay, and that was $150,000 over 25 years. And then if we took also another pesky thing called repair and maintenance that is usually involved with owning a home, because we can't get away from that. We're the homeowners. We have to repair and maintain. It was basically 1% of the $1 million. So 1% every year went into repairs and maintenance. So $10,000 a year, 25 years is $250,000 over 25 years. Holy crap.
Which kind of makes sense if you think about it. Like, one rental will cost you like $50,000 to $100,000
well,
at minimum.
Let's assume you don't even reno anything, right?
Yeah.
Let's assume you just repair and maintain lawn, walls, leaks, whatever, windows. That led you to essentially, okay, now we add all that up. So you got $400,000 of property tax and repairs and maintenance when you add that up, plus the $1.4 million of total loan cost, gives you $1.8 million. Now, let's not forget, we have to add in the $200,000 down payment that we spent.
Yep, already.
It's sunk cost. Like, you can't use that anymore.
So you sunk $2 million.
$2 million over 25 years.
Over 25 years.
And we won't account for inflation and the loss of the money and all that stuff.
Just $2 million.
$2 million flat. Okay. And here's the cool thing. Well, how about the upside of buying? Well, there's appreciation, right? We hope there's appreciation, right? The long-term view is the hard assets will appreciate over time because people need houses to live in for as long as we're here. We took a very modest 20 appreciation rate of 3%
A year.
a year. Okay, it could be lower, it could be higher. You put in whatever number you want. We think 3% is very reasonable. Over 25 years, that essentially inflated and appreciated the house to $2 million.
So your $1 million home today becomes worth or is worth $2 million in 25 years.
Yeah. And like pretty much right then and there, at the end of 25 years, we were talking about downsizing at the beginning of this episode. At some point, you're going to want to sell, right? And
well, that's how you get your money is
that's
you
exactly it.
Sell your asset.
Yeah, you sell your asset after it's been paid off. And the huge benefit, obviously, of owning your primary residence in Canada currently is that it's non-taxable, right?
Yeah.
You're not taxed on your primary residence until the government decides to change that rule. So then let's say you sold it for $2 million. Let's say you sold it even for 2.01, whatever. It's pretty much a wash after that, right? Because you got $2 million in the bank. You spent $2 million over 25 years.
So you're net zero.
You're kind of net zero, yeah.
Somewhat net zero.
Yeah. So kind of crazy if you think about it. But the other thing too is just keep that in mind. Keep this number in mind. A $800,000 mortgage, it requires a $5,000 per month payment.
That's crazy.
Okay. So that's what you would have to pay monthly to sustain and keep that mortgage going without defaulting. So keep that in mind, okay? Because that's going to be useful for the next part. So now that we've kind of covered the buying, just the math portion of buying, well, what's renting look like, right? So assuming that we go rent the exact same house.
Yep. So
right?
you're renting the same $1 million home. So we're trying to compare apples to apples. The whole point is compare. You picked a house. Should I buy it or rent it? Like we can't compare, buying a 4-bedroom house to renting a basement apartment. Like the numbers will not. You can't compare it that way, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly. And it's based on your life situation, your how many, all those things. So okay, so a comparable house of $1 million, give or take, okay, could be running as low as $3,500 per month.
Yeah, that's what we estimated that this size of house, $1 million home, would cost you $3,500 a month in rent. Yeah.
And here's the thing, right? So we did not mention utilities or anything like that, internet, all those things.
In the cost of ownership.
Yeah, in the cost of ownership, because it's pretty much a wash in both scenarios. Whether you're owning your own residence or you're renting, you have to pay for that one way or the other, right? So it becomes a wash when you compare it. So so $3,500 for a month, and this might be low. You might be thinking, "What the heck? $1 million home you're renting for $3,500? Whatever, 35 low end, probably higher, right?" Then it depends on where you are exactly. So if that essentially worked out, and because you are renting, right, the landlord is allowed a yearly rental increase, right, under normal circumstances, in economic times where you don't have black swan events like COVID, and raising it at a dismal 1.5% every year, increasing your rent 1.5%. So over 25 years, if you lived at the same place and you rented over and over again, you'd end up paying $2 million of rent. It's kind of crazy. When you put it in Excel, we were just like, what? Is this math right?
Yeah.
I guess so.
$2 million over 25 years spent in rent.
Yeah, $2 million. And like, you kind of understand why now some long-term tenants stay where they are. It's because, they don't want to have to pay even more than that. But so at the end of it, where, like, we look at it, okay, we paid $2 million of rent. Well, and if we bought and we paid $2 million, it's a wash. It's literally a wash whether you're renting or buying based on this topical math, right?
However,
high level. However, there is also a benefit to renting here that we didn't capture, which was there's a difference here, right? So assuming that you didn't obviously spend the 200,000, like we assume that you had $200,000 saved up regardless.
To put in a down payment to purchase.
Put in a down payment to purchase. But because you're renting, you're actually going to be able to utilize that $200,000
and invest it.
Plus, on top of that, the difference between what you would pay buying a home, like your monthly payments of, remember that $5,000 I told you guys to, like, remember what 5,000 meant?
Your mortgage payment of $5,000 versus your rent payment of $3,500.
Right.
The difference is that you have additional $1,500 a month to invest.
Yeah. And if you took that $1,500 a month and invested it, plus the $200,000 down, okay,
and invested it
wherever, okay, like doesn't matter where it is. So stock market, other things, whatever, okay.
Another rental property.
I don't know, whatever. And you got a modest 7% rate of return. Okay, 7%, because that's the benchmark we always use.
Because that's the reason why we use that benchmark is that's the average rate of return in general for the stock market.
That's right. And then that turned out to be essentially over 25 years, that the $200K down payment that you did not spend but invested it, plus the $1,500 difference a month that you reinvested, was $2.2 million. So
in 25 years.
In 25 years. So at the end of this, okay, just by math, we'd have $2.2 million in the bank or in our investments. But we spent $2 million in rent. Now, if we sold all of our investments, cashed it all in, cash money, baby.
You get $2.2 million.
Yeah, we got 2.2, but you spent $2 million in rent, so you're left with 200,000. Mm-hmm. However, here's the caveat, right? Is that because all that money, assume it wasn't in a tax-free account, assume it wasn't in a sheltered account, that gets taxed at your nominal tax rate.
Yep.
Okay. So that 200,000 gets taxed. Let's call it in half. Okay. Cut in half, maybe 30%, whatever, but it gets taxed. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, on the end of it, you come out slightly on top renting.
Yep. A little bit. Very little. I mean, it's enough to, I think, when you compare the two, it's not that big of a difference.
Yeah.
Right? Because there are obviously those numbers are based on specific situation. Like, so it's almost to the point where it's almost equal, I would say.
Yeah.
Between the two scenarios.
Yeah. So it's not complete wash, okay, for all the nitpickers out there. But it's very close. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So slightly on top with renting. Now, that's just the money. Okay. That's just the math, right? And we obviously mentioned at the beginning of this, when you make a purchase like this, you don't just look at math. So there's obviously other factors. Like, it's not just quantitative factors that you're looking at. You look at qualitative things that really drive the decision of these major milestone purchases, the most expensive purchase you'll ever make in your life.
Yeah.
Right? Other than marrying someone.
That's a very important decision.
Hey, well, the key is to marry right. And because if you don't marry right, you can cost you a lot of money too.
It's true.
Well, even if you marry right, it still can cost you a lot of money. The finer things that people like, right?
Right.
Anyways, then there's other things that we're looking at, like things that are qualitative. So really, when it came down to it, if you looked at the numbers, you're like, okay, well, over 25 years, does that really matter, that difference? I probably wouldn't even care, right? Then it comes down to like basically a lifestyle and an affordability question.
Yeah. Well, question is, if you want to buy, this scenario is assuming we have a down, right? So are you able to save $200,000? Right? Because if you can't do that, then this whole equation or this comparison is out the window, because we're going to get $200,000 to pay it down for your house.
Yeah.
Right. And number two, with buying a house at $1 million, your your mortgage payment is $5,000 a month. Can you sustain that with your current income? Right? Maybe you can sustain 3,500, but maybe not 5,000. I don't know. Right? It just depends on everyone's different situation.
Yeah, and like we're obviously not looking at, dual income, single income, wages, high earner, high net worth. That's for you to compare, right? Based on your scenario.
Yeah, this is assuming you can do either or financially.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So if you had the option and you had enough money where you can really make a decision whether you want to buy this house or rent this house, this is the money exercise that we would go through to do that. Obviously based on, the house that you're considering, right? Yeah, so our comparison is based assuming that person or that couple has the luxury of being able to choose between buying and renting that specific home.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy first world problem here. So like,
yeah.
But yeah, exactly. So like, there's the lifestyle, there's an affordability, there's obviously an emotional connection of these decisions, right? Where we will look at the math, but also have to really consider, okay, like what do we want, right? What do we want for ourselves and potentially for our families, our future? If you're thinking of having kids or not kids or whatever, right? Because when it comes down to it, like there's a few different things that we noted down as what we would consider like some of these things to consider, right? Like,
yeah, like people like stability, for example.
Right. And that was the big thing with owning your home, right?
Yeah.
It's stable to own your home.
It's stable. It's your house. You don't feel like you're going to get kicked out at any minute. And you feel like it's yours, right? Like when it comes to like decorating and renovating and those kind of things. I get that. Like it's a feeling, right? That you own the home and you make it your own.
Well, let's call it what it is. It's pride.
Yeah.
Right? You are proud to own your own home. Call it yours.
Yeah.
But I'm going to play devil's advocate, right? Even though we say like it's stable, I actually think it's the opposite, because if you default on your $5,000 a month mortgage, the bank's going to come knocking the day after you the day after you miss your payment and be like, "Hey, excuse me, what's going on?"
Yeah.
Right? Obviously it's not that fast, but that's the analogy. It's that you're the one responsible. If you can't fork up that money, then your house is on the line.
Yep.
Whereas if you're renting, you can miss a payment here and there. It's happened. Like if you're a landlord or real estate investor, you have gone through this before where you get rent late every once in a while.
Yep.
And do you kick them out right away? No, because there's a process involved.
Well, you can't.
And literally, if you're in Ontario or you're a Canadian or especially a Canadian, Ontario landlord, real estate investor, you know how hard it is to evict someone, even for non-paying on rent. But that's a 3-beer kind of conversation. And yeah, like, but a lot of us don't know that, because if you've never rented, or you're not a landlord, you wouldn't know those little details, right? But we're here to tell you, so you know what those details are. And maintenance, right? We talk about maintenance. It's not an emotional thing, but that's an actual like lifestyle thing, where if you're renting, you don't have to maintain anything. Well, to the majority of the degree, you're not maintaining most of everything.
Yeah. Call the landlord.
Toilets leaking?
Call the landlord. Plumbing issue? Call the landlord.
Got a hole in my roof?
Call the landlord.
The lawn's too long?
Call the landlord.
Noisy tenants?
Call the landlord.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, but that's exactly it. But if you were owning your home, you're out there.
Got to deal with all that shit.
Either you're paying someone to do all that, or you're dealing with it, right? And 9 out of 10 times, I guarantee y'all are going to be dealing with it yourself, because you cheap asses like me. So, but yeah, so that part, there's a whole thing about privacy too, which was kind of I think one that we never really considered, obviously, because we are fortunate enough to own our primary residence.
Mm-hmm.
Although it feels like our neighbors are literally 3 feet from us because of these subdivisions, how small, how close they build homes.
Yep.
But that whole thing about, well, if I'm living in another house with multiple units, I got little privacy and all that stuff,
Like you're
which,
in a basement unit, or maybe you're sharing a unit with somebody else.
yeah, and to some degree that's true. I mean, but like it's if most landlords out there that we know and real estate investors go really out of their way to design these units so that there's a lot of sound isolation, so you actually
Mm-hmm.
don't have these privacy concerns, right? It's never 100% foolproof, but we do what we can to make that work. But that we acknowledge that as an actual issue, like, right, that's an emotional thing. And other things too, like there's some benefits of owning a home where, yes, you've put in the $200,000. However, over a time, like the thing about owning assets, and even though owning your own primary home is not an asset, I don't consider that an asset because it doesn't put cash flow in your pocket. However, you're able to like borrow against the house through a
Yeah.
line of credit. So we call it a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. And as you pay down your mortgage, you can build up this credit line that you can borrow against. So you're essentially collateralizing your home, right?
Yeah.
And this is
That's the benefit.
This is the benefit of owning your own home, is that you have access to this line of credit.
Yeah. Versus in a regular, if you didn't own a home, you didn't have that leverage and you didn't have that collateral, the line of credit that you would be able to get from the bank would be much lower, just because it would just be based on your salary, right? Your general income, versus being able to take a HELOC out on your house.
Yeah, and the interest rate on those unsecured lines of credits are punitive
Yeah.
to the point sometimes they don't even make sense, right? And those are obviously for emergencies or like really great opportunities for flipping your money or something like that, or buying an investment. But then, like, I guess at the end of the day, right, like, we ran some numbers, right? We looked at this and we were like, okay, if it's a wash and slightly on top renting, why don't people rent more? Maybe because they've never done this exercise. But I truly believe that a lot of it is the psychological aspects and the social norms that we've been programmed with, as we were mentioning.
Yeah, and I think now, because prices are so high, I think people are questioning whether buying your home is the right decision for them. I think, right? Versus back in the day, maybe houses were more affordable,
Yep.
more within the reach of an average middle class person, that, they just automatically just go to buying. But now it's like you're really questioning, do I really want to buy my home? Because it's $1 million you got to commit to.
Yeah, and if there's anyone listening that is going through this decision, right, in your current situation right now, I would implore you to look at the numbers, but also ask yourself, why do you really want to buy a home? Is it because you want to call your own home? Is it, do you want to show your parents, be like, hey, I bought my own home, and celebrate with that housewarming party that you always wanted, that you always been to?
Mm-hmm.
Ask yourself, really, why do I want to own a home? And those reasons can be only answered by you.
Yep.
Because we can only see from the outside and base our observations from our experiences and what we see. But really, you need to ask yourself, like, okay, what the hell do I want to buy this for? And like Jen mentioned, with affordability being so low, it begs to really question deep down inside, saying, do I really need to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, right, you have to be able to sleep at night knowing that you can sustain those mortgage payments and
Afford a home.
to afford a home. Because at the end of the day, like, here's the other thing that we would always tell people: you don't want to work so hard and continue working just to be house poor, just to say that you have your own house.
Mm-hmm.
People have beautiful houses, but there could be tons of people that are so house poor that all they're doing, they're working literally to pay their mortgage.
Yeah.
Which, if you ask me, that's not my everyday rich.
Well, no, because you want to take some of the hard-earned money that you've worked for, and yes, you got to pay off your necessities and get a roof over your head, but hopefully that you're able to enjoy some of that money for yourself, right?
Yep.
Provide for your kids, provide for your family, treat yourself, right? Things like that. That's important too, right? It's not just about, I don't know, paying off your mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, right, you want to, you want to live your everyday rich, and however that is, that's up to you to decide.
Like, wouldn't it suck to be able to, pay a mortgage on your big, beautiful home, but not be able to furnish it?
Yeah, that's, we used to drive around this road called Mississauga Road and going to Bridle Path and all these other like really high end neighborhoods. And you'd see a house and you'd be like, God damn, that house is massive. Like, Jesus. First of all, the question's like, how much does it cost to heat that place and cool it? But the second thing was like, how much furniture do you need
To fill it.
Half the time the house is probably empty. Like, you have furniture just sitting there. It's like an art galleria of Structube and IKEA and whatever places people shop at.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, this is the kind of thing, right? So it's true.
You got to take that all into account.
Yeah, we're not even taking into account like stuff. Yeah, how much does it cost to like put stuff in your house?
Yeah.
And like that's the other thing too, is that as a renter, I mean, like most of the time, like
We still have to buy furniture as a renter.
Yeah,
regardless. So that's why it's almost, like I said, more of a wash as well, right? Because on both sides of the equation, you have to buy furniture.
Yeah, and I get it. Like, if you're owning a home, you're gonna have a lot of pride in picking out specific pieces of furniture that really, cater to your style, your taste, to really make it your own. We've seen tenants, actually one of our tenants, like really decorate their place really nice.
But that's because she's a rent-to-own tenant.
That's right.
So that's what I'm saying. The psychology is when people own a home, they're going to put more effort into making it their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and that's exactly, that just boils down to the psychology and the emotional part of the Canadian dream, right? Before we wrap up, we asked ourselves, actually before we started here, and as we wrap up, we asked ourselves, if we were to do this all over again, would we buy or rent?
So if I were to, like, if it was today's decision, like if I had to make a decision, like I didn't own this house that I live in right now today, and I had to choose whether to buy or rent this home, I would probably rent. Only reason because I don't want to have an $800,000 mortgage.
Yeah.
And I don't want to have to, like you said, worry about sustaining that that mortgage payment for 25 years. It's a big payment, right?
It's pretty daunting to consider that, yeah.
Versus if I were to make that same decision, 11 years ago when we bought this house, this particular house, I would probably still buy this house just because the mortgage payments were a lot lower. So I feel like there's less pressure to make those payments every month.
Well, the houses were a third of the cost.
Oh yeah, for sure. Right. So that's the difference, right? The decision before would have been to buy, but the decision now would have been probably to rent.
Yeah.
That's just my
younger self, knowing what I know now, it's half and half of your answer. So in the current situation right now, obviously with kids, with a family, now I would probably rent, right? Because just the housing costs, the affordability is too much, right? It's out of reach. So if I had to start from scratch, try to build $200,000, yeah, I'm sure we can eventually do it. And there's lots of creative ways to do it. But just, simplistic thinking, like, no, I would rent. If it was my younger self, I would buy, but I would also, knowing what I know, house hack.
What's house hacking?
So this term house hacking is where you buy the house, but you rent a portion of it out so that rented portion covers majority or all of it, your mortgage cost, so that you essentially live for free. Now that sounds very predatorial, and it's not, believe me. And that's just, these are just strategies that people have to use now. And back in the day, what people did was they had multi-generational families, and that's happening more now. Multi-generational families
Yeah.
are living together. You're charging maybe your brother or your uncle or whoever to pay, right?
Well, you're all contributing to the mortgage.
You're all
Essentially.
contributing it, right? But instead of your family member, you're charging it to someone else that's looking for somewhere to live because they can't afford it, right? So you're solving a problem by providing a solution, which also benefits you. Like, that's capitalism at heart,
Yeah.
right? And I would totally do that. And I would totally recommend, well, it's not advice, but I would recommend you look into house hacking. And we know people that are house hacking now, which honestly, that's the only way that makes it work for them.
Right now, yeah, with
Yeah.
with the amount of mortgage payments that you have to be putting up every month.
But I think the key thing is also to be opportunistic, right? How can you put yourself ahead, right? Because if you're not using any of those funds to invest, okay, great. Well, then how do you put yourself ahead of the inflation game, of all these things that are happening to the middle class, where it's so much harder for us to get ahead with just stagnant wages. Everyone's looks like they're trying to find a side hustle to just keep up. Well, one way is to reduce your living costs. So if you can reduce that by half or like 90%, like you're already ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Even if you just did that for a few years, right? Take your ego and your pride away, and just that would be an awesome way for people to get ahead. Right? Because you kill two birds with one stone. You own your home, call it yours, but you also get half of it paid off or more.
By somebody else.
Exactly. But yeah, like another thing too, I was thinking about, like, as you kind of go through these points in your life, you kind of reflect differently, obviously, on what you could and should have done or whatever. I think the key thing is just arming yourself with the right information and knowledge, right? Because we didn't know this 11, 12 years ago.
Yep.
That would have totally might have changed our trajectory of, who knows, right? How much maybe faster, but we don't know, right? We can't guess what that would have done.
Yep.
But we know what that has done for people that are doing it now, and even like 3-4 years ago, where that has put them, right? Those steps that they took before, when people are saying, no, you shouldn't do that, like, it's turned out for them.
Yep.
So that's all we're here to kind of share and enlighten, our experiences, but also the experiences that from people that we've met. So hopefully you can take that and live your everyday rich, whatever that means to you. So, I think at the bottom line of it is you guys figure out, what works for you from a lifestyle and affordability question. But really, there's so many unique ways of being able to do this now. And when it comes down to it, it's, what are you comfortable with?
Yeah.
Right.
And run your own numbers.
Yeah.
Like, take the house that you want, wherever it is, whatever it costs, and do some math. How much is it going to cost you to own that home? How much is it going to cost you to rent that home? Right?
Yeah.
And do the math for yourself.
Yeah. Bottom line, math doesn't lie.
No.
However, it does get interfered with emotions when it comes to buying your own personal
Oh, yeah,
home.
for sure.
So, just a disclaimer here, like the numbers we used here, okay, were just napkin math, right? Excel napkin math, but like, take it with a grain of salt. Okay. So if there's a hole in this, hey, let us know. Happy to discuss what that hole was, because, that might have changed the number. I don't know. But the bottom line is this is how we ran it. And if you want some help running something like this, feel free to reach out. It's not too complicated for us to help redo that, so that, it gives you guys some more confidence and clarity in when you're running numbers, right? But the bottom line is, you ask yourself, like, deep down, like, well, why do you want to buy a home, right? Is it worth it, renting or buying? Only you can answer.
For sure.
So, I guess the only decision we have here is, rate us, share, comment, DM, whatever you want. It helps these conversations get out to more people so that, we could spread the word and really kind of push this movement that we really are visioning, how we can help people, right? Bottom line is, because if you're empowered with more information, you're putting yourself into a better position over the long term.
To make your own decisions.
Yeah, exactly. So, is that it? I think that's it, right?
That is it.
Yeah. All right. Well, damn, these chairs were comfortable.
Yeah, they are.
Sitting in this for like 45 minutes. Not bad. I like them. Hopefully, hopefully our next guest, if we have a guest in-house, they could sit on this, but we got to figure out how to put them in. But I guess this one's going to be mine because I'm going to have my butt imprint on here.
Right. All right.
All right. Anyways, guys, thanks very much. Appreciate the support as always. Till next time.
See ya.
Peace.
Your Everyday Rich podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. Any such information or other material should not be construed as legal, tax, investment, financial, or other advice. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional.